Well, let's just be very clear on what the ban is supposed to be doing. It's a policy that's part of a wider package that's going to hopefully drive down the price of electric vehicles. So this is not the case where, come the time where we're not selling new petrol and diesel vehicles, they'll still be at the same price. We will see a collapsing price. The first mobile phone, which I think was released in 1983, cost $4,000, had 18-minute battery life, and it weighed about a kilogram. And obviously we saw a reduction in cost and an improvement in technology. We'll see the same thing with electric vehicles as well.
But why are you so confident of that? Because using batteries is not a new technology, and they've been trying to miniaturise batteries now for a long time. They've had electric vehicles for a long time. I think the first electric taxis came in at the turn of the 20th century. They haven't managed to get the technology to advance so far. Why do you think it will change now?
It's improved hugely. The range on many electric cars now is in excess of 250 miles. Some new models coming out next year are pushing over 400, maybe towards 500. So the technology is improving all the time. And the reason why I feel so confident is because of things like competition and market forces, which will drive improvements in these technologies and already have.
And the manufacturers of Kia and Vauxhall saying that it's not feasible? What do you say to them?
Well, they do say it's feasible. So Stellantis, the owner of Vauxhall, has seen record profits, partly driven by a 41% increase in EV sales. When they were talking the other day about the need for more money, it will help their bottom line if government puts subsidy in. So the world is heading towards electric vehicles. Those companies know that, and they want more support.
And they're fishing for government subsidy. Joanne?
Well, the government heavily subsidises electric cars already. I had to buy a new car last year, as indeed did my sister. I decided to buy a petrol car, slightly to make a statement. And she bought an electric car, and she bought an electric car because she has a small business. And the tax benefits of doing that were, to all intents and purposes, paid for the car itself. Now, that is a huge underwriting of the industry. Where I do agree with you to a certain extent, Laurie, is that, of course, that means that the prices are being kept, in a sense, artificially high, which would explain why, for so many people, and I don't think we know this statistic, but my hunch would be that if you look at that number, that 3% of cars that you were saying, Jacob, are electric cars or were sold as electric cars last year, I would imagine that the vast proportion of them were sold as second cars. So I'm not quite sure what the environmental impact of that is, but it doesn't strike me as being a particularly sensible use of resources.
Because keeping cars going to the end of their natural life is quite environmentally friendly rather than throwing them away and getting new ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem here really is there's so many obstacles put in the way of people who want to drive electric cars. They're difficult to fill up. There aren't enough charging points around. So at the moment, the government have got a target to try and meet this 2030, get rid of petrol and diesel, got a target of 300,000 charging points around the country. At the moment, they won't meet it. They need to actually up the number that they're putting out there by 300% a month at the moment. So it is those obstacles. Like Joanne, I was thinking of buying a new car last summer and looked at electric cars, thought this was the right thing to go and do.
That's not like me.
Prices, inconvenience. There was a whole host of reasons that ended up with a petrol car.
And you must have read Giles Corran on his electric car, which has been a complete disaster, breaks down all the time and can never be charged fast enough.
Yeah.
And he's written very amusingly about it, and that must be off-putting for people when not only may it break down, but when it breaks down you can't tow it, and charging takes a long time.
But it's important we get them. And I do believe that if we're going to reach the net zero target by 2050, there are so many things we've got to do. It's not that far away. So many things we've got to do to actually achieve that. And certainly electric cars are one way of doing it. So the important thing is that the industry, government, get their act into gear to make sure that we can actually start driving them around without too much hassle.
And Laurie, you're confident that electric is the right technology, rather than thinking about hydrogen cars or other technologies that could be coming forward?
I think the market's largely decided that electric is the bet to go for. We see that from where the car manufacturers are going, the huge resources that they've pumped into electric designs, the fact that that's the dominant offer that they're making on the market at the moment, the fact that that will save people money. It's a misconception to think that even with higher electricity prices at the moment, it's still not cheaper to charge an EV at home. It still is than using a petrol diesel car. And of course, it sorts out other problems as well, not just the issue around carbon emissions, air pollution issues, noise pollution issues. So and that's another reason why car manufacturers are going for this.
But Joanne, isn't there an anti-car movement in this country?
Hugely,
with restrictions on how people can drive, the 15-minute cities, the 20-mile-an-hour limits? And even if you're driving an environmentally friendly electric car, you can still only pootle along at 20 miles an hour and get overtaken by fast cyclists.
One of the few advantages, it seems to me, of an electric car is that they do accelerate very quickly, and that can be quite an exciting experience for a driver. But obviously, there's pretty much nowhere where you can put that to the test. But Laurie's talking about a market, the market having decided. It's not a free market. I'm not quite sure what kind of market it is, but it's one that's largely been preordained by big manufacturers and big business and big government. And it's not been exposed really to what ordinary people want and need. And to go to your point, Jacob, I mean, this is absolutely critical. I think there's a lot of mis-selling of the whole electric car issue on the basis that perhaps to those people who can afford them, they'll be able to use them to drive into towns. Whereas in actual fact, the movement against cars also includes electric cars. So there are increasingly now areas in London, I'm sorry to be metropolitan about this, where you're heavily restricted in being able to drive, to park, to use businesses, regardless of whether you've got an electric car or a petrol car.
And COVID was essentially used to have a war on the motorists, wasn't it? With mad schemes like the one on Park Lane that was a great wide road that people could use. Now had an extra cycle lane put in, even though there's a cycle lane just a few yards away in the park. So there is an anti-motorist feel, particularly in London.
Yeah, I think there probably is. What I think Sadiq Khan would like everyone to do in London is cycle everywhere, and he's making it more and more difficult for motorists. The one thing I think that if you look towards the future and where we're actually going with electric cars is a lot of that will disappear. If you've got an environmentally friendly vehicle which is not chucking out a load of emissions, it may well be some of these things can actually be relaxed. And it does seem to me it is the only way forward. If we believe in that target and actually reaching it, and not everyone does, if we believe in trying to deal with climate change, it really becomes the only way forward we can actually go for.